winning this game in Manhattan, most people won't agree with me because Iowa State was ranked. With where Iowa State was coming into that game and where K-State is coming into this game, I would look at the K-State win in Manhattan if they were able to get it as being, a bigger win than the Iowa State win at Allen Fieldhouse based on where both teams were at.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible. Paid all who enter, and beware this podcast. That's right, this is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer. I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, who is continuing to help out small businesses. And for Brett Goodwin and Alan Tipton taking over the Learning Tree in Kansas City, a beloved 25-year-old toy store was about more than business. It was about keeping the magic alive for Kansas City families. Emprise Bank made that transition seamless for them, guiding them through the SBA loan process so they could focus on building community and inspiring your minds. Emprise Bank is your partner in possible, and you can visit emprisebank.com/SBA to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC. We're getting a little bit of a mixed bag of a show here today. We're going to be talking some KU football as well as some KU basketball. Of course, Kansas is going to be taking on K-State in Manhattan on Saturday, part 2 of the Sunflower Showdown. We'll get to that later on in the show. But the hot news to start the show here as we record on Wednesday is yesterday, Tuesday afternoon, if you somehow missed it potentially, Kansas football finally released their official schedule for the fall of 2025. And this one had a little bit of extra meaning, I think, because you're back in the booth, the new booth, and you're coming off of a season that was overall disappointing, but you bring back Jalen Daniels. You've been really hot in the transfer portal, really hot in the high school class of 2026, getting some commits in the state of Kansas as well. So all in all, positive vibes right now around KU football. And then you get the schedule drop as well. Now, we did already sort of know what conference opponents Kansas were going to get, but of course didn't know what order that was going to come. Well, now you do have the official schedule plus the non-conference. So, Kevin, before I give you a chance here, I'll quickly just run through a couple of the highlights and we go that deeper into it. Number one, Kansas has a week 0 game. The season starts a week earlier for KU, August 23rd against Fresno State. They do play at Missouri as well on September 6th. You look at their conference schedule, it starts with West Virginia and Cincinnati at home, at UCF, at Texas Tech. Then you get K-State on October 25th, so sort of in the middle of conference play. At home, of course, that'll be a big game. Then Oklahoma State at home. And then you finish the season with back-to-back road games at Arizona and Iowa State. And then you end it with Utah at home on November 28th. That is KU's schedule, sort of just quickly run through in a nutshell. Kevin, first off, let's just start with maybe what stood out to you. What were the things that came to your mind immediately as you ran through what KU's 2025 opponents will be?
I tweeted out, Nick, I hesitate to call any schedule manageable after last year because I think that heading into last season, we felt like KU was avoiding all the top teams in the conference, and oh my gosh, the Big 12 turned upside down, and you wound up playing pretty much all of the top teams, missing the teams that struggled unexpectedly, like Utah, Oklahoma State, Arizona. It just wound up changing quite a bit. Having said that, I do think it's a positive schedule for a lot of reasons. Kansas plays at home in 4 of its first 5 games. The lone outlier being that trip to Columbia to take on Missouri. If you forgot, that rivalry is resuming in football this year. The other thing, Nick, is the bye week placement seemed really advantageous for Kansas. You get a bye week before West Virginia, which is the first Big 12 game. You get a bye week before K-State, who is coming to the new booth for the first time this year. And then you get a bye week before going to Iowa State, I believe. And so when you look at that and you look at how good this staff is coming off of bye weeks, and look, Nick, like that's not something me saying, hey, it seems like they're pretty good. No, they've won their last 4 games over the last 3 years coming off of bye weeks, and 3 of them have been against teams that were ranked at the time. KU's win over Oklahoma was coming off of a bye week. KU's win over Oklahoma State to seal that bowl game I know Oklahoma State had some injuries at quarterback, et cetera, but that was also maybe the best Kansas looked that entire season coming off of it. This year, of course, Kansas comes off the bye week before Houston, absolutely trounces Houston, and Houston winds up being a team that, threw some trouble into some people, and Kansas really took care of business in that one. The other one, Nick, was Kansas had a bye week after K-State and before Iowa State. Kansas was in trouble at that point. 2-6, I think, at the time, and you heard the players talk about, I really don't want to be on a bye week right now, don't want this extra time. They came out and played one of their best games of the season in putting down a ranked Iowa State team. And so for whatever reason, the Lance Leipold staff, they've figured this bye week thing out. The players come out looking really fresh. So I think that, the way that they do rest is probably part of that. They also come out usually with a few new looks or tweaks here and there that are good for that specific opponent. And so those were the two things to me, Nick, that kind of stood out. In addition to, again, we don't know what the top of the Big 12 is going to look like because it could, but no Arizona State, no BYU, some of those top teams, no Baylor, who of course Kansas has really struggled against. And so from that perspective, you did feel like at this point, at least, it's a somewhat advantageous schedule that could allow Kansas to build some early momentum and also allow Kansas to have some rest before some of its biggest games of the season.
Yeah, you miss BYU, Arizona State, who you mentioned, Baylor, and then TCU, I think, is the other one. Those are the ones that you miss if you're KU. And in case you're trying to figure out the math in your head thinking, wait a minute, 3 bye weeks? Well, that's because that's one of the perks of playing week 0. You get another bye week as it kind of works out in the schedule. So you play in week 0, then you get the bye after your last non-conference game against Missouri before you start conference play. Then you get another one before K-State in October, and then you get that third one in between those 2 road trips to Arizona and Iowa State in November. Those are the 3 times you get off. And I like having the bye week after Missouri or after a rivalry game in general. I like that. KU had it after the K-State game, and I think it probably fueled them a little bit more last season. So I like that first placement of that one. Your next one comes before K-State, like you mentioned. And similarly, I like anytime you have a bye week, either before or after a rivalry game, I like it because those are big games that you really want to, devote extra attention to or coming off of it. If it's an emotional game, win or loss, have time to sort of not let that, steam, either snowball positively or negatively to the rest of your season. So I like that second bye week. And the third one's nice too. It's in between 2 road trips when you go at Arizona and Iowa State. So that's nice where you're going to go to Arizona in November, where if that ends up being kind of a later game and you don't get back until, remember, that was a big topic of conversation this year when Kansas went to Arizona State, and Lance Leipold talked about, hey, basically losing a day because you can't get back until 5-6 a.m. Sunday morning. And if you're trying to play another game on Saturday, Kansas dodges that as well. If that's going to be the case, if that ends up being a later game against Arizona, they have a bye week, so they'll have plenty of time to recuperate before heading to Ames to take on Iowa State. And when you look at the conference in terms of the teams that they're going to play, feel pretty good about your first 2 home games, West Virginia, Cincinnati. UCF, I think, will probably be a tough one in Orlando. Texas Tech is a team that I know you're really excited about with what they've done in the transfer portal. So we'll see. That comes early enough in conference play where maybe if Texas Tech is still trying to iron some things out, you've got them early, maybe not later in the season. That could be a positive. K-State, again, kind of in the middle of conference play. I still am not 100% sure how much I love it being not at the end, but I guess it is what it is. But
do you know if Iowa State has a bye heading into the KU game as well? Like, I know K-State and KU both have byes that week. I know West Virginia actually plays Pitt during KU's bye week. So West Virginia has the rivalry game and then follows up with KU immediately after. So they don't have a bye that week. I didn't know if Iowa State also had a bye the same week KU did.
They do. Iowa State plays at TCU November 8th, and then they had the bye, and then Kansas on the 22nd. So both those teams will be well rested late in the season for that game. And obviously Iowa State and K-State play in Ireland and also in week 0. So you have that as well happening. So yeah, they'll have a bye before you go to Ames as well. So both teams will be well rested. And then you end the year with Utah, which I don't know if I love that or hate that, because Utah obviously was terrible this year, and their fans were really annoying all preseason, talking about how like, oh, we're too good for the Big 12, and then they just sucked. I feel bad for Cam Rising. I guess I shouldn't say I feel bad for Cam Rising. He's been playing football for like 9 years. But the point being is, I don't know what they're going to be. Kyle Whittingham is retiring. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing to get to the end of the year, because it could be similar to this year where maybe they're like, they only have 3 or 4 wins and they've just given up on their season. But like, also I could see it being very possible that they get it turned around in 1 year and are good again. So I don't know. Not sure how to feel about that one either, basically, to end the year. And then when you look at the non-conference schedule, we kind of glossed over a little bit with, you'd have Missouri, Fresno State at home. Fresno State has been a good group of 5 teams, so that's probably one to pay attention to. Your FCS
it'll be a challenge. It'll be a challenge, especially with KU breaking in so many new guys from the portal.
Yeah, and obviously that game will have some extra meaning to it because it'll be opening the new booth, right? So there'll be
for sure.
That should be a positive for Kansas, hopefully, with some extra energy and some extra juice for the stadium for that first game. And then you have Wagner after that, and then you do have that trip to Missouri and your non-conference play. But listen, you open conference play with 2 games at home, so that sets you up with a good runway to hopefully start 2-0 in conference play if you're KU as well. So that's a look at the schedule. If you are interested in looking at it more in depth, you can just head over to the KU football website. They've got it posted now as well. You can look at some of their team schedules also, but that's what KU's working with in 2025 in the fall, as they are going to be getting up for spring ball here pretty soon as well to get the ball rolling towards the fall of 2025, which is certainly exciting stuff. And the stadium obviously is going to be the most exciting part of that, the brand new stadium at David Booth, Kansas Memorial Stadium, which, by the way, if you don't live in Lawrence and you haven't had the chance to like go see, it's coming together. It looks pretty nice. Yeah, it looks pretty good. My excitement increases by the day for that first game in the booth.
What do you base it? 8 wins?
Yeah, unnamed sportsbook, no free ads. An unnamed sportsbook, they have KU's over-under at 7.5 for wins. And if we're going through the early, very early, like, I mean, there's like way too early predictions, and then there's like way too early predictions, which is basically what we're doing here. I think you go 2-1 in non-con, probably going to lose at Missouri. Hey, conference play, what? Well, yeah, I mean, I guess maybe if Bo Pribula's not good, maybe you can win, but
I have questions. Number one, how dare you?
Look, I don't want to lose to Missouri either, but I'm just saying, I think I don't like their chances today, February 5th, for that game, but a lot could change. You look at conference play. Again, I'm pretty confident you can start 2-0. You look at the UCF Texas Tech games, both on the road consecutively. Maybe you win 1, I would say. So that would put you at 3-1 in conference play going into the K-State games.
Going back to Scott Frost, and there's questions. I mean, it's interesting because
I guess that's true.
Every game that you mentioned was an interesting one too. With no more Neil Brown, Rich Rod is back in. What are you going to get from West Virginia? Some of these games have a lot of intrigue to them, and it's funny because I feel like we think of KU and think, man, there's a lot of questions here because there's so many new moving pieces, right? We've basically seen pretty much the same guys in KU's lineup for years now. Hand the ball to Devin Neal, throw the ball to Luke Grimm, LJ Arnold, and Quentin Skinner, and all of that is going to change this next year. But at the same time, a lot of teams on KU's schedule have arguably just as many moving pieces, if not more.
Yeah. You mentioned Rich Rod. I actually forgotten that UCF moved on from Gus Malzahn, so forgot about that. So maybe that gives you a better chance in that one. So let's say you're 3-1. That would be, I guess, my general prediction. I want to pick KU obviously against K-State. We'll see. We'll see. Oklahoma State is also another team that's like, Mike Gundy was fired, then he wasn't fired, then it was like Mike Gundy was holding the program hostage or something, like very, very bizarre vibes there. And now he's everything's fine, I think, at least for the time being. So that's an interesting one. And then again, at Arizona, at Iowa State, we'll see. I mean, I expect Iowa State to probably be a top 25 team again this year. Arizona, I guess they're going to be losing a lot. They lost McMillan. Fafita, I think, is gone too, right? So
yeah, I think so.
So who knows with that one? And then, like I said, and then I kind of like I gave my piece with Utah as well. Like who knows with Utah also. So I like KU's chances of getting to 8 wins. I really do. I mean, if I had to pick their losses, I'd say Missouri, one of UCF, Texas Tech. That's 2. K-State, maybe that would be your 3rd one, and then one of Arizona, Iowa State. That's 4. So you do that. I mean, that adds up to 8 wins right there if that's how it plays out. So we'll see. Let's shift gears here, Kevin, a little bit. You had mentioned it. Somebody had asked about the NFL draft, which is a little over 2 months away. It's at the end of April, so 2.5 months away, basically, with KU. But obviously, there were players participating in sort of those after football season bowl games. You had Devin Neal at the Senior Bowl. You had Kobe Bryant and Bryce Cabeldue at the East West Shrine Bowl. A lot of positives for those two guys specifically. Kobe Bryant and Bryce Cabeldue both were, I believe, in the top 10, right? Of
Joe's spelled on prom, I think. Yeah,
and NFL.com. Yeah, so those are two guys that really impressed. Kobe Bryant, I saw a lot of positives from him, just his ball skills and everything. And he's maybe an interesting one to watch when you look at him and Mello Dotson, because I think from a prototypical like size and standpoint and length, probably Mello Dotson is more intriguing for NFL teams because of his size and length. But like Kobe, I think, could easily be a very viable player as well for NFL teams that are interested in that. And then Devin Neal, to me, seems like the guy that has the best chance of being drafted the highest. A lot of early scouting sites have him as a 3rd, 4th, possibly. The Chiefs have multiple picks in that range. That would be really cool to get a hometown guy. Obviously, they picked Felix Anudike-Uzomah in the 1st round a couple of years ago when he was the hometown guy. So I don't know, something to keep an eye on there. But
fellow KCSN employee Kent Swanson has said he's circling that number 96 pick for the Chiefs because that's kind of the range for Devin Neal. Maybe a few picks earlier, maybe a few picks after, but right around that range is kind of what he's circling for the possibility of Devin Neal, rocking the Chiefs jersey. Real quick, Fafita is back, by the way. So
okay,
that is something to consider. But of course, he couldn't save Arizona this year. I'm not sure,
and now he's not going to have McMillan. So.
I'm not sure anybody could have saved Arizona this season. So we'll see if they get that turned around.
Yeah. This is not a Chiefs podcast, but regardless of whether it's Devin Neal or not, the Chiefs are probably going to be drafting a running back. So we'll see if it does happen to be Devin Neal. It would be really cool for both of us, since I know both of us are Chiefs fans, and probably for a lot of you guys that listen, being probably both KU and Chiefs fans as well. So that would be a really cool story potentially also. Okay, anything else? Any final thoughts on football before we move on to some KU basketball?
No. I think this could be a fun draft class to watch for KU. Just real quick, because I do think that there are some guys in this group that have a chance to not just make a team, but potentially have long NFL careers. And it's always cool when you're watching Sunday Night Football and the guy comes up and says, their name and University of Kansas or Kansas. So
yeah,
looks like you'll have a few of those guys in this class that have a chance to stick for a while.
Which, by the way, that only further improves KU as a program, right? When you're put guys in the NFL, every time Dorrance Nordstrom makes a play, it's there we go, rock chalk. So really cool stuff.
We are going to share a year by Dominic Pooney, being on also all rookie teams and getting his mention as he did for an offensive lineman. That can't hurt. And Austin Booker was one of kind of the draft darlings last year when draftees kind of got into the tape where they said, man, we really like this guy. So, yeah, the more of those guys you put out there, obviously, the better.
100%. Okay, we are going to shift gears to some Kansas basketball on the other side of a break. Of course, I have to tell you about Home Field Apparel. Look, if you want to support guys in the NFL draft and show off your Kansas apparel, what better place to get it from than Home Field Apparel? You can go to homefieldapparel.com, shop 40-plus Kansas items. Of course, I have the Fahey shirt rocking the namesake of the show here. on our YouTube channel if you're watching there. So shout out to Home Field Apparel. They've got incredibly comfortable gear. Also, I love the joggers. Those keep me warm when it's cold. It's gotten cold again. So
Get away in the joggers and just walk by Brett Beach's house over and over again.
Yes. Yeah. And then Brett Veach is going to be like, I saw this really weird guy walking around like every day with KU gear on it, but KU stuck with me. And then I saw this kid named Devin Neal and is he something KU? And I was like, oh, I guess you should draft him.
Do your part.
Exactly. And hey, if you're Brett Veach and you want to buy yourself some KU football gear, you can use the promo code PAY24, 15% off your first order over at homefieldapparel.com. We're going to shift gears to some KU basketball coming up right after the break. Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com. This is the Pay Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, member FDIC. If you are watching on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN and you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Subscribe and hit the like button on our show, and also turn on the notification bell for when we go live after games. We anticipate going live after the KU K-State game on Saturday, which we're going to be diving into in just a moment. If you're listening on the audio side, of course, you can subscribe there as well. Leave a 5-star rating and review. Share your thoughts. We love hearing from you guys. We love hearing from people that are KU fans, whether it's on our YouTube channel, via our ratings and reviews, or on our social media pages at Flaherty KCSN for Kevin. You can also follow the at Payheed accounts, Payheed KCSN on Twitter as well, to engage with us there. So lots of ways to get in contact with the show and stay in contact with us. And it's always really fun talking to fans and interacting with people always. And Kansas basketball has a big game coming up on Saturday in Manhattan at Bramlage Coliseum against the Kansas State Wildcats. Sunflower Showdown, 1:00 tip on Saturday, which is kind of cool. An afternoon tip on Saturday afternoon. Now, I just want to take a step back for a second. Regardless of how good or bad K-State is, this game is always in Manhattan. This game is always juiced up. Always.
Oh, yeah.
It's the only game K-State cares about. They sell out every time. The vitriol is certainly there from them. They will be fired up for sure for this game against KU like they always are. That being said, at the start of the season, K-State had bought a pretty expensive roster, as it was kind of publicly noted, and they really imploded early in the season. They were really bad. I mean, just downright terrible. Which was not bad to see. Actually, I kind of loved seeing it. It was awesome. And so that put this game into a little bit of different context, because it was going to be, okay, this really bad but still talented K-State team, would they rally together when KU comes to town? Well, as it turns out, K-State has already rallied together. This was a team that was 7-11. They were sub 115 in KenPom when they were 7-11. But they have gone on a pretty remarkable run over the last 4 games to get back to 500. They are now 11-11. They beat West Virginia by 13 at home. They go at home against Oklahoma State and win by 30, a team that had beaten them by 13 on the road back in January. Then they get the big win at Iowa State and Ames by 19. And then if you happen to stay up last night, Tuesday night, which I don't blame you if you didn't, but if you maybe right when you were about to go to bed, it was a 9:00 tip, Kansas State at Arizona State. And if you maybe just sit up to catch the first part of the game before you went to bed, you would have thought, oh my gosh, they're free falling again. They're back to being bad. Arizona State got up 18-2. K-State, it took them 7 minutes to score in the game. Well, if you happen to turn it off like I did and maybe woke up on Wednesday morning, this morning, you may have discovered that actually K-State somehow came back to win that game in Tempe. So they are now on a 4-game win streak, and they have really started to figure some things out. And I think regardless of if this 4-game win streak had happened or not, if K-State was 8-12 right now, which is I think what it was going to look like they were going to be, I would still be sitting here saying this is like a red alert type of game, because regardless, K-State has a lot of talent. Again, it's like the only game they care about. They could be 1-15 or 15-1. It doesn't matter. They're going to come with the same energy, and this team has talent. So I would be cautioning this game. But now honestly, Kevin, I'm cautioning even more. Like I'm downright worried about this game, given how K-State's been playing. Obviously, on the flip side for Kansas, you bounce back from the Baylor game with a big win against Iowa State of your own. But I think you almost have to just take a step back and say, okay, well, how much of that was Kansas and how much of it was Iowa State being what they're being, which is a train wreck, right? So I don't know. When you look at this game, what's your feelings on it, and where do you think how do you think this thing might play out?
Yeah, it's interesting. I know there's a Nick Palm. Is there a Nick Torvik?
Nick Torvik can be created, yes.
Because on Bart Torvik, one of the cool features is you can take the dates and basically ask it how a team is playing over a certain period, which is a great feature to have. The number 2 team in the country, Nick, over the last 4 weeks, heading back to their game on Saturday, is Kansas State, and they're 4-0, obviously, over that stretch. They have the number 19 offense, which when you think about K-State's struggles this year, they've been pretty good on defense sometimes, a little bit more inconsistent, I feel like, on offense. But they've had the number 7 defense over that time period, number 19 offense. And so top 20 in both categories. And so, yeah, you do have to approach this as a game where you're playing a team that's playing at a top 25 level, because Kansas State's done that over the last couple of weeks. Whatever the record says, it says 11-11. To your point, K-State could be, 1-11 or 0-20, 0-22. And you're still going to see them come out, with a lot of ferocity in this game. And so for me, it's one of those games that you really look at too, because we've talked about the biggest issue with this KU team has been consistency, and specifically, at times it's been consistency in effort. We've talked about how maybe it's more accurate to say consistency and focus. This is going to be a game where you're going to need to be focused throughout, because there are going to be runs. You really don't want to have the inverse of what happened with Arizona State against K-State come out and get down 18-2 and put yourself behind the 8 ball like you did against Missouri, like you did against West Virginia, and some of these other games. But the other part of it, Nick, is even if you come out and play extremely well and build like a 15-point lead or whatever, you cannot take your foot off the gas, because this is a team that's playing with a lot of confidence and a team that is capable of putting up some runs in them. And so a 15-point lead can get down to 2 or 3 and really uncomfortable in a hurry. I think when you look at kind of the X's and O's of it, you really don't want K-State to knock down outside shots, because I think that's one of sort of the keys to that offense. It sounds, trite to say that because it feels like that's everybody. But at the same time, if K-State is not making outside shots, that offense can be a little bit brutal sometimes. Whereas if they're making outside shots with the way they're capable of defending and all the other things, they can really put you into a bind. KU guarded Brendan Howson, I thought, exceptionally well in Lawrence. That's going to need to be a key again. I'm interested to see how KU handles Coleman Hawkins. And the reason I say that, Nick, is we talked about after the Iowa State game how that was a KJ Adams game, right? They basically played Hunter Dickinson in drop rather than having him hedge, which we had talked about on the show as maybe being something that would help Hunter out a little bit defensively. And they switched 1 through 4, basically, and KJ Adams allowed them to do that. Coleman Hawkins is a guy who's comfortable playing away from the basket. If you look at where Flory Badunga has maybe struggled a little bit when he's struggled on defense, it's been against guys who have mature offensive games, who can pull him away from the basket, can then put the ball on the floor, who can move without the ball, and put him into situations that, quite frankly, most young centers are just not used to being in. And so I think Flory is going to get really good at that stuff with his length and athleticism. It's just he's still building on that. And so I think that's the thing I'm interested in, Nick, is this a 30 to 35 minutes of KJ Adams at the 4 game because of that? Or is it something where, hey, you feel like Fleury's providing enough of a benefit at the 4 next to Hunter Dickinson that maybe you try and get him a few more minutes there in the 4 than you did against Iowa State?
Yeah, I think when you look at strictly the size situation with Coleman Hawkins and David Gasson, like those are two guys that are 6'9", 6'10". So I think from that standpoint, you would maybe want to see Fleury a bit more. But like you said, if it gets into a situation where Fleury is stuck on Coleman Hawkins, that could create some issues. And obviously, from K-State's perspective, Gasson is certainly more the traditional like 5 type player as opposed to Hawkins, who can do a lot of different stuff. And then to your point on Brennan Hasen, he is certainly the guy to watch, especially when it comes from the perimeter. 41% from 3 on pretty high volume. Like he's actually been very, very good for K-State for what they brought him in for, which is shooting threes. He's been really good. One other thing to note with K-State, though, Kevin, is they've really hardly gotten anything from their bench recently as part of the stretch. It's been a lot of sort of their same consistent 5 guys.
Does that surprise you at all? Because it felt like coming out of the KU game that David Castillo is going to be a big part of kind of them trying to turn the wheel to get back on track. And so that's I'm going to be honest with you, that's kind of surprised me a little bit, and that I thought that when they found, quote unquote, the lineups that they trusted and the guys that could be in there, I figured Castillo and maybe Jones and some of those other guys would be in that group, and they'd be a little bit deeper than they have been lately.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing is you look at the first basically 14 games for K-State, and their lineups were all over the place. Their minute distribution was all over the place. I mean, it seemed like Jerome Tang didn't have any idea at all what he wanted to do, what players he wanted on the floor together. It was just basically complete chaos. But as part of this 4-game winning streak, they've basically kind of gone away from that, and they've played sort of the same guys, right? And I think it kind of starts with Doug McDaniel, who was a transfer they got from Michigan, a guy that I think they were really excited about, and he basically flopped to start the season. Didn't play, got benched quite a bit, but he has turned a corner, it would seem, for K-State, and he is a dangerous offensive player as well for them. And you figure him against DeJuan Harris and Shaq Moore would be the matchups to keep an eye on the perimeter as well. So, yeah, I don't know. It's honestly, like I said, it's really tough to fully gauge this K-State team. Like, they have good talent. They have talented players. I don't think there's any question about that. But with the way they started the season, where it was just kind of complete chaos, but now all of a sudden they've seemingly figured some things out. They've won 4 games in a row. And now, again, this is certainly K-State's biggest game of the season, right? Because at this point, even if they win on Saturday, their chances of making the NCAA tournament are like less than 10%. So assuming they're not going to make the NCAA tournament, this is their biggest game of the season, period. And I would hope that Bill Self is going to impress that upon his team and Bill Self should know better than anybody what it's like to go play in Manhattan, right? And the other thing that really irks me, and hopefully that will change on Saturday, is Bill Self has not beaten Jerome Tang in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Jerome Tang is undefeated against Kansas in Manhattan. I hate that. I despise that. I want that to end. I really want it to end, because we can't have a cornball with that kind of record at home against Bill Self. I can't stand it. I can't stand it.
The funny thing is, Nick knows that I love Jerome Tang and love him. Love him personally. Got to know him a little bit when he was at Baylor and everything else. And it almost kind of cracked me up when they were struggling earlier this season, because Tang is so forward facing with his faith and everything. When they were really struggling, he almost reminded me of Bob Uecker in Major League, when he's looking for the stats and he can't find it. And he goes, "Christ, I can't find it. The hell with it." And so like it actually, like, it almost kind of cracked me up to see him kind of in that mode. But I mean, credit to Tang and that staff and everything.
Oh yeah,
it's been easy to see everything just go off the rails. The other thing that I would add to your point too is, if K-State wants to make the NCAA tournament, this needs to be the most important game. Like they need to stack quality wins in a hurry and continue the streak. And so even if they're not making the NCAA tournament, it's the biggest game because it's your rival. You're not going to play in the NCAA tournament. If you're planning to play in the NCAA tournament, this needs to be your biggest game because you need to get enough quality wins that the selection committee, I don't want to say ignores your bad start because they don't do that. And there used to be kind of a criteria where they looked at like the last 10 games. They don't do that anymore. It's strictly, your picture in a box basically. But at the same time, you want to give them so many quality wins that when you're sitting there at 17-13 or whatever you wind up being, they can't say no to you. And from that perspective, this is a must-win game for K-State as well.
Yeah, look, I do want to give Jerome Tang a lot of credit because, like you said, you've got this K-State team is basically a team of hired mercenaries. I mean, they've got a bunch of transfers that they brought in, and I don't think it's much of a secret how much they paid for certain players on their team. And it would be very easy to say, wow, the season is tanked, we're cooked, we're done. Who cares what happens the rest of the way, right? And they've done a really nice job of not letting that happen and showing some pride and showing some fight and picking up some good wins, which is really good for them, obviously. I just hope that doesn't continue on Saturday. Also.
Sure. No, I get that. And from my point of view, it's like I really like Jerome Tang. I really admire, a lot about him, but still want Kansas to beat K-State in Manhattan on Saturday and get that sweep. It is such an interesting thing because I think to your point, so often it feels like the formula is you play the first game of the conference season in Manhattan, and it may just feel this way in case they beats you and they return to Allen Fieldhouse and your angry Kansas team, 20 balls them or whatever. And this year with it being reversed, with Kansas getting, the big win to start off, it was a game that, if you remember right, like KU was like, we should have won that by more. K-State, Coleman Hawkins was like, we felt like we should have won that game. And so it's going to be a pretty hopping atmosphere, I think, on Saturday. And Kansas, the best thing you can do with a rival is to go in and tear their heart out. And Kansas has a chance to do that on Saturday.
Yeah, you remember that first game, Kansas got up 14-0 pretty early, and then KU just kind of turned on autopilot for the rest of the game, and K-State was able to hang around. They got it to 6 late in the second half. Never got any closer though, but they outscored Kansas the last 35 minutes of the game. So I want to see Kansas have a little bit more of a killer instinct. I think that's a term that I've seen people use about this team. Where do they have that, right? You think about the Baylor game and what happened, against Iowa State. I wouldn't necessarily say they showed killer instinct, but they showed that they could maintain that level of play and beat a team like that for 40 minutes, which was good to see. But yeah, maybe we'll see a little bit of that in this game against K-State. And I'm also going to bang the drum again. Zeke Mayo continues to be elite at home, but there's just some missing confidence for him on the road. And this will be another game for him to try to shake that and be really effective, right? I mean, he's a Kansas guy. He's a Lawrence guy. Even though he's a transfer, he should know this rivalry maybe better than anybody else on the team, to be quite honest with you. Besides probably KJ Adams and DeJuan Harris, I guess, because of how many times they played in it. But he should know that. And this is a chance for him to sort of break that, because that streak of him being really, really good at home and then struggling on the road, it's continued, and it continues to bother me because I mentioned it before. The NCAA tournament is not played at Allen Fieldhouse. If it was, Kansas might have 20 national championships at this point. So, with that being said, Zeke Mayo, I'm going to bang the drum again. This is an opportunity for him to showcase what he can do. We know what he can do, but can he do it on the road in an environment like this against an opponent like this that, even though he's a transfer, he should have plenty of history with from being in Lawrence? I guess I didn't really kick this off with saying it, but he's my player. He's my player to watch.
That was going to be my next question. Like, let's get into the predictions. Who the player to watch? is
Zeke Mayo.
Zeke Mayo.
That's my player to watch.
All right. I think it's a good player to watch, especially since he was so good against K-State in Lawrence. And obviously Hunter was really good in that game as well. KJ didn't play in that game. And so I'm interested to see what that dynamic looks like with KJ and Flory and kind of how that whole thing works out. I think my player to watch, I really like the Zeke Mayo pick. I'm tempted to go with KJ slash Flory, but I'm going to pick Rylan Griffin. And the reason why, Nick, is I think against Iowa State, Kansas is able to get Rylan Griffin some terrific looks. And it's something that I think Griffin is doing the other things pretty well. He's had some nice drives. He's actually made some really nice passes. I know he said before the season, when we talked to him at Media Day, he talked about how passing was maybe his weakness. He's made a couple nice plays off the bounce and being able to pass. And he's done some nice things defensively too, Nick. I think KU needs to have a day where they're not shooting, 6 for 18 from 3 probably to win this one. And so I think that while Hunter's important, while I'm interested to see with K-State's two big lineup, how KU counters that with KJ and Flory, I think I'm interested to see if this could be one of those games where Rylan Griffin hits 3 or 4 threes and kind of for the same reason that you're talking about Zeke, just in that I think the opportunities are going to be there. I think Kansas is going to need to convert on those opportunities. And so I'm watching Rylan Griffin to see if he gets the same looks that he got against Iowa State in Lawrence. Is he knocking those shots down? That'll be something to watch for me.
Yeah, an honorable mention guy, this kind of ties in with Rylan Griffin. You look at that first game, Shaq Moore played 31 minutes.
Yeah,
first game against K-State, and his minute distribution has gone way down over the past couple of games.
Sure.
You wonder how much that has to do with maybe his foot bothering him again. I think that's popped up a little bit, but because of that, Rylan Griffin only played 12 minutes in the first K-State game. So we'll see if that continues. AJ Storr got quite a bit of run in that first K-State game. You mentioned no KJ in that first K-State game. Obviously, that will help probably disperse the minutes a little bit more. We'll see how much he ends up playing versus Flory Badunga. And again, I would urge everyone to just, whatever the starting lineup is, just be calm. Just it'll be okay. It'll be okay.
Yeah. I mean, Self has said for 20 years now that it's not important who starts, it's important who finishes. And I would say even more than just who finishes, I would say look at who's out there with 5 minutes left in a close game, because when you finish, maybe Flory comes off the court because he can struggle from the free throw line sometimes or something like that. But when the game is in, it's deciding point, and you're saying, hey, this is a close game. It's possession to possession. Who's out there on the court in that time period? I think it's interesting, Nick, because I do think there are guys in the, Bill Self Circle of Trust, TM, that would not surprise you that are out there. But I also think, to Self's credit, and I know there are people who would disagree with me on this, there are guys that have been on the court in those situations because Self has played the hot hand some in those situations. It hasn't necessarily been a super static, this is who has to be out there in those situations. And so I'm interested to see, Shaq Moore has been out there, in those situations. Rylan Griffin has been out there in those situations to a lesser extent, but at times AJ Storr has been out there in those situations. And so it does still feel like Kansas is maybe figuring that part out a little bit, and it could depend on matchups. But if this is a 3-point game with 5 minutes left, who's on the court?
Well, how about this game preview? What do you think? How do you think this thing plays out in Manhattan?
It's
Saturday afternoon.
It's tough to pick KU to win in Manhattan because they just haven't had a lot of success there. 1, 2, we've talked about this team not being consistent, but also, Nick, I think that Kansas has had some terrific flashes over the last few games. I think that Kansas maybe isn't as far away as people think that they are. When you look at, the way you played against Houston for 39 minutes, when you look at the first half, against Baylor, when you look at what they did against Iowa State, especially in the first half, I think this is a team that's kind of rounding into form a little bit. And I think that this is a game where they have a chance to make a statement. To me, the statement is just winning. Like it's not, it's not, oh, you have to go win by 10. No, get out of there with a 1-point win on a controversial call if you have to. Just find a way to get out of Manhattan with a win. But I do think Kansas does it. I'm going to say something like 75-73. But like I said, I do think Kansas is starting to figure out some of the lineup questions. I think some of those pieces that we've talked about are starting to figure out their roles and how they work. And so I do think that Kansas finds a way to get this one done. And I'll say something else, Nick. Winning this game in Manhattan, most people won't agree with me because Iowa State was ranked. With where Iowa State was coming into that game and where K-State is coming into this game, I would look at the K-State win in Manhattan if they were able to get it as being, a bigger win than the Iowa State win at Allen Fieldhouse based on where both teams were at.
Yeah, I mean, to further extend that thought, you could make the argument this would be one of KU's biggest wins in conference play.
Yeah.
If they pull it off, right? I mean, you look at KU's wins in conference play, UCF twice, Arizona State, Cincinnati, K-State at home, TCU on the road, Iowa State. Like the Iowa State game obviously is the one that jumps out because of where Iowa State was ranked. But like you mentioned, Iowa State is seemingly in a free fall right now. So we'll see kind of what happens with them. Like this would maybe be your biggest win of conference play to this point. And again, I've highlighted it a couple times in our past couple shows. I think winning this game also then tees you up with a fairly, I don't want to use the term easy, but a fairly, I know you like the term manageable, so we'll use that. A fairly manageable, rest of February, next 5 games. Colorado's 102nd in KenPom. Utah is 89th. Oklahoma State's 107th. Those are 4 of your next 5 opponents with a game at BYU in there as well, before you finish the year with 3 top 10 KenPom teams in Texas Tech, Houston, and Arizona. So, you win this game against K-State, it should set you up to snowball a little bit and win some of these games against bottom tier Big 12 teams that then hopefully you can be in full high gear in those final 3 games of conference play. So, yeah, I think from that standpoint, I would maybe say, hey, this has a chance to be the biggest conference win of the season to this point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I mean, KU beat Houston, right? And I went to sleep with 30 seconds left to go.
Yeah. DeJuan Harris was going to the line up 6 with 17 seconds left, and I turned the TV off because I figured it was over. And so that's what happened, right? And then the Baylor game. I mean, the Baylor game, it was halftime. It went toward. I was
even off at halftime. Obviously,
I was like, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go mow my grass that I don't have. But I think they won that one too. So yeah, I don't know, but I'm gonna go with KU too. Obviously, I can't sit here and pick K-State. My heart won't let me do it, and I do think that honestly, I think if KU does win this game, it'll also make it that much sweeter knowing that K-State has had this resurgence, and they think that they're back sort of, and then you still go in there and win. So I would really, really love this game a lot for KU to take it home. And like I said, I'm sure that Bill Self will impress the importance of this game upon his team. This is, in this era, listen, I will tip my hat to K-State in this respect. In this era of NIL, transfers, conference realignment, all this stuff that has seemingly killed a lot of great rivalries in college sports, this one in specifically, especially in basketball, when KU goes to Manhattan, it feels like a true deep rivalry. It is real. The vitriol, the hatred, it is real. It is there. And I like it. It's for many people, I'm sure it's the reason why they like college sports too. And unfortunately, you don't get that as much nowadays, but I like it. And I look forward to it. I hope it's a great atmosphere. And then I hope KU goes in there and finds a way to silence all those people at Bramwich Coliseum. So should be a really fun game. I'm picking KU as well. I'm going to go. I just hope the game doesn't go to overtime. The past 2 games have gone overtime. KU's lost both. That's been annoying. I'm going to go KU 77-71.
Okay.
KU over K-State. That's my pick.
Yeah, it would be nice to not have it be a single bucket game at the very end, because it feels like KU's played too many of those in Manhattan and too many have gone the wrong way at the very end.
Yeah. So, but in case you're wondering, Jerome Tang has since lost a game in overtime. Remember, Jerome Tang had that crazy streak where he was like 13-0 in overtime games. He's lost. He lost an overtime game, I think, last year. So that's good. We can put that one to bed. But let's just avoid that entirely and not go overtime this game. Let's start with that. So
that sounds good. I think that would be nice. Also lost in overtime to Drake earlier this year, if you remember.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so it should be a really fun game. I think we are planning to have a live show after the game on Saturday afternoon. So if you are on our YouTube channel, or if you haven't already, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. We're going to be live on YouTube after the K-State game, I'm sure, on Saturday afternoon. So you can subscribe, hit the little alarm bell notification so you'll notified when we go live, and you can join in on a live chat. We've had some lively conversations in those post-game shows with different people coming in and sharing their thoughts after the game. So we would love to see and hear from you on Saturday afternoon after the KU K-State game on our YouTube channel. So, but of course, if you just listen on the audio side, that's fantastic too. We love to hear from you guys as well that listen on audio. You can leave a 5-star rating and review and share your thoughts there as well on our audio platforms also. Kevin, you got any more thoughts for our good listeners?
No. Go out and get this one done. We talked about after the Iowa State game how basically it was a great win, but we always knew KU had an A game. We wanted to see them be able to carry that out over multiple games and be consistent. Their chances on Saturday.
Absolutely. That's going to do it for this edition of the Paid Podcast. He's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer, and we'll talk to you again on Saturday. Win or lose, rain or shine, we'll be there. Hopefully it's a fun show, but otherwise we'll be there regardless. So hopefully we see you there too as well. Until then, stay safe. Stay safe the rest of this week. Rock chalk, and we'll talk to you again soon. See ya.